Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. And each and every week, our mission is to bring you the real news. What's really happening in our communities, what's happening in our states, in our countries, what's happening in our whole world, our whole planet, and what's also happening throughout the multiverse. So we have a lot of news to cover. And we do this in a lot of different ways, right? We have our news that we bring you throughout the week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That includes news coverage that our team puts together where we go, more in depth on some of the headlines maybe you've seen, maybe you've not seen, but we try to give you a more worldly perspective on, not what's just happening in your neck of the woods, but also around the world. We also have local stories as told through the eyes of our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating the new Earth. And we have updates through the Global Intelligence Agency, who understands exactly what's happening on this planet, as well as our transition to the new Earth and how Earth fits in with all the other planets out there and all the universes and the entire multiverse together. And it's a really beautiful story because light beings are coming together to not only help Earth, but helping Earth actually helps the entire multiverse. And if you have been following us for a while, you already know that. If you want more information on who we are and what we do, you can go to unitednetwork.earth. That's our website. And you can become a member. That will give you instant access to all of the content we put out there. If you want to hang on and wait a week after we release it to our members, it also goes out on YouTube and Rumble. So that's another way you can get access to our content. Just head on over to our sites and subscribe. And if you want the links to those, you can go to the bottom of our website and links to all of our social media are there. What you're listening to now, this is a podcast and it is a week in review. So I take the stories that we have discussed throughout the week and I take our top stories and I give you just a quick review of some of the things that you may want to go back and check out. So I think this podcast in itself is a great way to catch up on stuff that maybe you may have missed. Maybe, someone wants to know a little bit more about UNN, or you think someone might be interested and you want to send them a link so maybe they can get a feel for us. But honestly, the bulk of the content is really available to our members right away. So I would encourage you guys to check that out. With all of the content we put out there, I always encourage you guys, and our whole team does, think critically and ask questions. We are done just listening to someone because they happen to have a show on whatever, cable news, or they happen to have a successful podcast or whatever it is. We have to go back to using our brains, thinking critically, absorbing the information, and then making an educated decision on what we believe and how we can use that information moving forward. We talk a lot about discernment. This is your inner lie detector test. And the more you tune into that, the better off you're going to be in understanding all the craziness that is happening in our world today. If you think you're just going to tune into, various news sources online and try to figure it out, well, you're probably going to be swayed in different ways. But if you tune into your own discernment, that they can't take from you because the truth is a frequency. And so are lies. That's a different type of frequency. And if you can tune in to what the truth frequency is, then no one can ever deceive you again. And I hope that's what you guys are learning a little bit of, as we go through these stories and as you're exploring on your own. Okay, any announcements? This was a really big week for us, you guys. Really, I thought last week was a big week. And I remember telling you guys in last week's podcast, the story of Dr. Young, which I encourage you guys to check out. And I'll include a link in the podcast notes for this because we have released almost all of the content that we have on Dr. Young and the stories that have come from his story because it's pretty fascinating how this is kind of unraveled within the last week. We've put all of that online through a single link. So I'm going to include that in the description. But I highly encourage you guys to get to know his story more because this is becoming explosive. And I told you guys last week, I'm like, there's an energy behind this story and I don't know where it's going. But holy cow, I really was not prepared for this. And I feel very fortunate to have played a role in the dismantling and understanding of the connectedness between things that are happening on a national and international scale, because it kind of ties back to Dr. Young and the craziness that's going on with him, which is happening in my backyard in San Diego County. So anyway, check out that information. Again, I'll include the link in the description because if you haven't heard of this story, you kind of need to check it out to understand what's happening on our planet right now. It's pretty incredible. Okay, so let's get to our stories. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. All right, we always kick things off with our awesome field messengers. And our first story comes from Diane out of Uganda. And she does a story on corporal punishment. So that is the physical punishment, like caning, that happens. In this case, we're talking about Ugandan schools. And that's where Diane lives. And she has a child that is in the school system over there. And she has some personal experience with this because her child came home and talked about some of the disciplining that was happening at the school. And Diane didn't realize that this was still happening. And she talks about her process of going to various places in Uganda and making sure this doesn't happen to other kids. And as it turned out, this kind of physical punishment had actually been banned in Ugandan schools since 2016. However, there were schools still doing it. And so it appears from the video that Diane being able to file a complaint has at least stopped that, reduced that. She hasn't heard of any other cases of it since filing that complaint in her school. So this is just, a story of, holding people accountable. We give a lot of credit for the people that took action when this complaint was made. It's a step in the right direction. All right, Dorothy from Montana, that's a state in the U.S., talks about her use of the terpenes in cannabis. She talks about her own personal journey of healing and how she was able to use these terpenes. And she interviews someone who has experience with this. I believe it was her shop that Dorothy went to, but it's more than just a shop because they do a lot of education around this. Because if you have some sort of ailment, how you take cannabis, the way you take it, these kind of things all play a factor in your healing journey. And you need to make sure it comes from that kind of perspective and not just, some of these shops that I'm sure just want you to get high or whatever, right? You've got to have a true intention behind it for healing. And Dorothy shares her journey with us, which is fascinating. Monica. Now, normally Monica's in Romania, right? She takes us all around Romania and shows us all the cool sights. Well, this time she's in Bulgaria, which borders Romania. And she takes us inside a submarine. It's actually a submarine from 1959, and it has been transformed into one of Bulgaria's most popular museums. And she talks a little bit about the history of it. We get this exclusive tour. Whenever I see, whether it's like ships, like really big ships, I'm not talking about like cruise ships, I'm talking about naval ships, or I don't think I've ever been on a submarine, but they always look so uncomfortable. And that's what I was thinking too when Monica was showing us this video. It's like these little crawl holes and things like that. And then you got gears and things you turn all over the place. Still, a fascinating history with this submarine. She said the last navigation was back in 2010. And here are some interesting figures for you. So it's 76 meters, which I looked it up. I had to do a conversion. It's almost 250 feet in length. And it could go down, when it was in use, it could go down 300 meters, which is about 984 feet. And it also housed a crew of 60. So very interesting, right? Sharif out of eastern Uganda shows us the fishing program out of the area there, and it's transforming younger people's lives by teaching valuable trade skills and basic business practices. So he basically takes us behind the scenes and shows us how they set everything up. And he talks about the benefits of fish farming in the region, also some of the challenges they face. And my main takeaway from this was how this allows Ugandans, and especially younger Ugandans in this case, because that's who's really flocking to this. It allows them to provide a living for themselves and their families without having a lot of capital to get involved, right? It's not like it takes a lot of money to start something like this, but once it's up and running, he said they can sell each fish for 10,000 Ugandan shillings. Someone's going to have to do the translation on that for me because I didn't get a chance to convert that into US dollars. But still, they're doing something on their own, right? They're not relying on their government or anybody else, and they didn't have to have a lot of money to get started, and it's definitely helping them in a lot of ways. Amy from, well, usually it's New Jersey, but she's in Connecticut for this story. That's another state in the U.S. She takes us to a farm in Bridgewater, Connecticut, and explores how chickens are raised there with access to fresh pastures. And they, as a result, produce organic, cage-free eggs and meat. So if you ever wanted to take a look at how it looks when you get outside of the factory farming and all the horrible things that they do, the crowding that happens, and then the animals are living in feces, it's just disgusting. I've done a few stories on this, and even the video to research and produce the story, a lot of it I didn't even feel like I could include on the news because it was just too bad and literally heartbreaking. So when I see beautiful chickens out in pasture enjoying their life, that is a 180-degree turn from these other videos for factory farming, and it's a beautiful thing to see. All right, Susan out of well, actually, she's usually out of Sweden. We have a lot of people in areas, like doing stories in areas that are different from where they're from. So Susan is usually out of Sweden, but she is in Oslo, Norway for this story, and she is winter bathing. So it's kind of like the polar plunge. Have you heard of this thing? It was like a I dare you to do this kind of thing, at least in in the West. And I'm sure people do this on a regular basis, but the idea is getting in water that's really cold. I think she said it was only 5 degrees Celsius, which is about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And the idea is not for a dare. The idea is that it can boost your immunity, it can improve circulation, and it can lift your mood. And there are people that do this on a regular basis. I've heard of even, I think Joe Rogan says he does this on a daily basis. He's got something in his house. I don't know. Who knows if these people are telling the truth? But still, there can be a lot of benefits for that. And if nothing else, it's definitely going to wake you up. Tim out of Canada takes us to a place called Liberty Gardens. This is in Vancouver, Canada. And he says Liberty Gardens is a perfect spot to relax, enjoy a very peaceful moment. And he takes us on a tour of this place. And what I thought was really interesting about this story, first of all, there's music playing in the background that we don't usually allow music on UNN because of copyright issues. However, this was his own music that he decided to play, which I thought was kind of cool. And he also gives us a history of this land. So he says these beautiful gardens were reclaimed industrial land. There was once a brewery on the land, and when the brewery left, the idea was to give it back to the people. In fact, I think the brewery donated a bunch of money, and the people wanted it to turn into a public place. Well, the local government didn't really like that idea because they wouldn't have received as many taxes, right? You can't really just tax flowers, right? And so Ultimately, the people won, which is a pretty cool story in itself. And there were a lot of tulips that were donated, so the bulbs of a tulip. And there's an interesting story with that too. According to Tim, Canada every year gets how many? 20,000 tulip bulbs every year from the Netherlands. And apparently that is a thank you for Canadian soldiers liberating the Netherlands in 1945. Very interesting. So they use some of those bulbs, and maybe they still use them. Maybe they replace flowers and things like that. But the beauty of all this, I think that's why it's called Liberty Gardens. Anyway, just made that connection. And there's no charge for this. So it's just a beauty of nature that Canadians can enjoy. And of course, you too, if you visit. All right, Justin out of New Hampshire takes us to his bedroom, actually, because he is making a very meaningful impact by donating his treasured dinosaur-themed collection to children in need. And this was beautiful. He took us through the whole process. He packed up, some things, put them in bags, and they actually went to the donation place. And this goes to Crispin House, which is a local charity for them. And that charity helps support children and families. So it's a beautiful story, right? Something maybe that you're done with. I know we've done this a lot in my house. Whenever the kids grow out of something, we always donate it. That's just something that I firmly believe in. And it was beautiful that Justin did that as well. And our final story is from Marion out of the Netherlands. And she shows us how farmers in the Netherlands are turning a challenge into something really beautiful. So they are facing challenges in transporting their produce to market. So they've basically created a subscription service, which some of you have may seen, versions of this, where a delivery box can arrive at your door with farm fresh produce. And you don't even have to leave your house. Don't even have to go to a market. I know my family and I do that every 2 weeks. We get a box that's local from the farmers in the area. I actually get fresh flowers delivered every 2 weeks too, much to my husband's dismay, because he's like, what's this extra charge for? I'm like, we need flowers in the house. So we get great produce that we get to pick on the website, which is kind of fun as well. And it just livens up the house. It's beautiful. And I love to see that they're doing this in the Netherlands as well. Okay, let's talk about some of the in-depth stories that the team and I created for you guys that were released this week. First, let's talk about CT scans. They're also called CAT scans. Well, they have become a vital tool in modern medicine thanks to their ability to quickly produce detailed images of the body. And this can aid in everything from diagnosing injuries to tracking chronic conditions. However, concerns are rising over the cumulative radiation exposure they deliver, something you have to consider, especially since one scan can equal hundreds of regular X-rays. And the usage varies widely across facilities. With roughly 375 million scans performed globally each year, and usage steadily increasing due to aging populations and technological advances, experts are urging caution, particularly for children and young adults who may undergo multiple scans over time.
Do not get a CT scan or any imaging study without asking, how much radiation am I seeing? And if a person can't tell you how many millisieverts of radiation you're being exposed to, then just say, I'm going to wait a minute until somebody can tell me that.
I realize,
and keep in mind, 50. If 50 is the most you should ever be exposed to in a year, there better be a damn good reason why I'm going to get 25 in a day. Now, there are some people who have to do this. If you're a cancer patient and they're scanning you as a part of your treatment, I mean, you have to pick and choose between those two opportunities. So I don't want to create some fear mongering where, Oh my God, if you hit 50 in a year, you're hosed. No, it's just, I wouldn't want to hit 50 a year every year for my whole life. And I certainly wouldn't want to be hitting hundreds a year for any period of time.
While CAT scans are generally safe when used appropriately, experts recommend patients discuss alternatives like MRIs or ultrasounds, inquire about low-dose options, and track their scan history to minimize unnecessary exposure and safeguard long-term health. Iron deficiency is a widespread nutritional issue that can leave you feeling tired, weak, and mentally foggy. And it's more serious than many people realize. It can impact people of all ages, from causing developmental delays in children to increasing risks during pregnancy and even contributing to life-threatening complications in adults. While dietary changes or supplements often help, absorption can be tricky, especially for vegetarians, menstruating women, or those with low stomach acid. Plus, copper, believe it or not, plays a key role in helping the body properly use iron. So without enough of it, anemia can occur. Since common habits and foods can block iron absorption, being strategic about when and how you take iron supplements really matters.
Okay, so you're iron deficient. You came back, your ferritin was low. Started taking iron, and your ferritin's still low. Start taking more iron, your ferritin's still low. Is the thing you need to do continue just to pound your body full of iron? Probably not. Sure, you need iron, but you probably also need something else. Either you need to look at your absorption of iron, you need to look at your inflammation, you need to look at hormone balance, you need to look at vitamin D levels, consider, copper, magnesium, B vitamins. There's a bunch of other nutrients that all interact to support iron absorption, iron utilization, and just the balance of iron in the body, and even red blood cell creation. So I find it kind of traumatizing when I hear that people have low iron and their goal is just to take more iron, 100 milligrams, 200 milligrams. Let's just keep pounding the body full of iron. Nothing in the body works by itself.
If you are feeling off, a simple blood test can help determine if low iron or anemia is to blame, because balancing iron is essential to staying energized and healthy. Atrazine is a widely used herbicide in U.S. agriculture. It's praised by farmers, at least some farmers, for its weed-killing power, but it's also raising serious concerns about its long-term impact on health and the environment, especially through water contamination. Though it breaks down fairly quickly in soil, it lingers much longer in rivers and groundwater, where it can pose risks.
This particular toxin, it's a pesticide. It's called atrazine, and it's just one, again, of the thousands of these toxins. It's sprayed on many different types of crops, for example, corn. And when the atrazine is sprayed in the corn, it goes onto the ground, and then when it rains, that atrazine on the ground runs into your drinking water. It's everywhere in the United States. 70 million pounds per year are used of this. And see that picture there? That's a frog. That frog went from a male to a female because of 200 parts per million being exposed to atrazine in its water. 200 parts per million. The government, the United States government, allows 3,000 parts per million in our drinking water. That ain't good.
Studies have linked atrazine exposure to developmental and reproductive issues, and while it is banned in more than 35 countries, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency recently proposed increasing the allowable limit in drinking water, sparking backlash from environmental groups. There you go, the government helping us out once again. Legal battles and health warnings continue to highlight the controversy, but individuals can reduce exposure by using certified water filters and choosing organic or locally sourced produce wherever possible. South Africa is facing a growing healthcare crisis as thousands of newly qualified doctors remain unemployed despite a national shortage of medical professionals. Budget constraints, mismanagement, and rising training costs, especially for doctors trained abroad, have left the system strained, with many junior doctors unable to secure posts after completing their mandatory service.
Countrywide, we've been having a problem in how junior doctors are treated and how they go through their internship training. Unfortunately, they are very vulnerable during that period because, by and large, they wish to complete their training, which requires of them to go through various rotations. And to be able to be signed off, you need to have worked within that rotation for a certain amount of time and reach certain competencies. But during that period, we tend to see a lot of abuse that comes, unfortunately, from the senior colleagues and those who are entrusted to with their training, such that they would be made to work long hours, more often unremunerated hours. They'll be made, in fact, to feel less of doctors in such an extent that they go through processes of intimidation and victimization, to the extent that, by and large, many interns actually end up having issues of mental health because of the sheer complexity of the space that they work in.
While public sector doctors earn competitive salaries, especially with overtime, the government argues high payroll costs limit new hires. Critics blame poor planning and corruption, which has drained billions from the health budget. In response, the National Health Council recently approved the hiring of 1,200 doctors and other healthcare workers, backed by a new 1.78 billion rand budget allocation aimed at easing staffing shortages in public hospitals. Public libraries across India are in decline. They are underfunded, understaffed, and often inaccessible, leaving millions without a space to read or learn. With just one library for every 30,000 people and even fewer in rural areas, access remains a major challenge. But in the face of this crisis, everyday citizens are stepping up to create community libraries. So that's the good news. Small grassroots spaces, and these are run by volunteers, powered by donations, and built with heart. Initiatives like the Community Library Project and Let's Educate Children in Need are transforming lives by providing free books, safe spaces, and educational programs.
We started the first community library in Cherua, which is in Balia district of Uttar Pradesh. So upon seeing the responses and impact of that library, we thought that every village should have this kind of library.
These libraries are not just about reading, they are hubs for connection, creativity, and community growth, proving that even on a shoestring budget, a passion for learning can spark powerful change. As cybersecurity threats grow, companies are increasingly relying on ethical hackers, also known as bug bounty hunters, to detect vulnerabilities before malicious hackers do. Once a niche idea, bug bounty programs are now essential for tech giants, startups, and even governments, offering substantial payouts for critical flaw discoveries. Despite the rewards, it's a tough, competitive field marked by legal gray areas, mental fatigue, and unpredictable income.
This is the reality of bug bounty hunting as a primary source of income. Historically, not great on its own because it's not very sustainable. Bug bounty hunting takes a lot of time to find, you see people making all this money, but it takes them a long time to find the bugs that will actually pay out that well. And a lot of people that have tried to do it full time, they end up getting a regular job or getting a secondary source of income because it's just not that sustainable. But there is a caveat to this that I want to introduce to you, and that is the concept of dollar arbitrage throughout the world. You see, if you were earning in U.S. dollars, the U.S. dollar is a very strong currency compared to a lot of other countries out there. So if you want to live in South America, Asia, in Eastern Europe, and things like that, your dollar is going to go super far. So if you did bug bounty hunting and earned in dollars there, suddenly what was not sustainable in the U.S. could actually be very sustainable in these other countries.
Platforms like HackerOne and BugCrowd connect hackers to opportunities, while AI tools are enhancing but not replacing the work of human hunters. With the right skills, ethics, and persistence, bug bounty hunting offers a dynamic path in today's digital defense landscape. As solar power becomes more widespread, many are turning to used solar panels as an affordable, eco-friendly option. These secondhand panels, often retired from large solar farms or commercial upgrades, are being reused in some pretty creative ways, powering everything from RVs and tiny homes to urban garages and food stalls. While recycling old panels can be complex and even costly, repurposing them extends their life even more and cuts down on e-waste. Though they may have lower efficiency and no warranties, the growing DIY community, along with refurbished solar kits, makes it easier for people to harness the sun on a budget, bringing renewable energy within reach for more households. Organ trafficking in Kenya is a rising and deeply troubling issue, fueled by poverty, legal loopholes, and high global demand for organs. A 2025 investigation by German media exposed an international network exploiting young Kenyans and linking transplants at local hospitals to recipients from Germany, Israel, and beyond. Despite earlier warnings, the Kenyan government only recently acted, halting these surgeries, suspending officials and foreign doctors, and launching a formal probe. Loopholes in Kenyan law allow kidney sales to go unpunished, and abuses also stretch into the Gulf, where returning migrant workers have shown signs of organ harvesting.
The bigger problem is the fact that we do not have a policy or a legal framework for organ donation and transplantation in this country, which is, I think, is what we need to fix the most. So there are unscrupulous medics who are taking advantage of that lacuna in law to do things that are shocking.
The scandal underscores a dire need for stronger protections, oversight, and international accountability. Vibration therapy is a non-invasive wellness technique that uses gentle vibrations, either through whole-body platforms or targeted devices, to stimulate muscles, improve circulation, and support recovery. It's gaining popularity for its potential to enhance mobility, posture, and pain relief, especially in people with specific conditions like cerebral palsy or autism. Studies have shown it can help children walk farther, calm sensory systems, and aid seniors in staying active and independent.
You've probably heard that whole body vibration is a fantastic tool for building bigger, stronger bones. But what you might not know is that whole body vibration training has a bunch of other benefits as well. Here are my top 3. Whole body vibration can provide a significant boost to your metabolism. In this study, researchers found that with just 10 sessions of whole body vibration, they could increase the amount of calories that people burned at rest by nearly 20%. Whole body vibration training can improve your balance and significantly reduce your risk for falling. This study found that by training with whole body vibration just 2 times per week, postmenopausal women could slash their incidence of falls by 50%. Training with whole body vibration improves cognitive function. This recently published systematic review found that whole body vibration enhances a wide spectrum of cognitive functions.
While generally safe, it's not suitable for everyone and should be used under professional guidance. With roots dating back to ancient times, modern technology has made vibration therapy more effective and widely accessible than ever. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, this was a crazy week, and all of that kind of craziness was also apparent in the GIA reports for this week. So Kim Gogan, she is the head of the Global Intelligence Agency. She put out 2 different reports this week, and they were jam-packed with information. So I suggest you go back. One report was released on Monday. The other one was released on Friday, and actually watch or listen to these reports, because I can only give you the basic highlights. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to do my best, guys. All right, for Monday's report, Kim started talking a little bit off the top about the 2020 presidential election in the United States. Kim has mentioned a lot of this information before, and whenever she provides a backstory, it's usually because whatever is happening now is related to the backstory that she's giving you, right? You kind of have to have the whole picture. So, since I'm going to play one of these sound bites, I need to give you a little bit of background here. So, in 2020, and Kim has mentioned this before, Trump actually won that election. He had the votes, and we know there's probably a lot of things that happened. That was a totally messed up election, but he actually did have the votes, okay? But we know elections are really selections, and so just because the guy that you voted for had enough votes doesn't mean he actually becomes, or she becomes, president, right? But here's the thing. This was all planned out, okay? Trump the martyr. Oh, yes, I lost the presidency. We will get them, guys. Well, what was happening behind the scenes is Trump was actually promised a higher position. And if you're new to UNN, you may be thinking, what in the world is bigger than the presidency of the United States? The answer is there's a lot. There are far bigger positions that the order has. The president of the United States is a puppet. Just like all presidents, just like all prime ministers, and even a lot of our senators and, PMs and they're all in this together. Kim likes to say it's Hollywood for ugly people. That's what politics is. Now, even if you get into politics with a heart of gold, you will either be kicked out, you will be silenced in some way, perhaps permanently, but you're not going to get on the committees. You're not going to have a voice unless you play their game. So anyone that gets to the top is there for nefarious purposes and usually for their own gain, as we know Trump is. I mean, he's just, the original Trump was just milking this thing for everything it's worth. There's a lot happening behind the scenes. Now, their plan with the 2020 election was Biden gets into office. We make him look like a baffling buffoon, which they did a really good job of that. And in that, the United States is going to fall. We're going to hand over global power to China. And then the idea from Trump's team, and this is what he was promised, is he was going to come in and save the world. Okay, they were going to give him this higher position. And it really had nothing to do with caring about the United States. It's not like the United States would be back on top. It was just, Trump needs to rule the world, basically. But he was promised this higher position. And this was uncovered last weekend by Kim and her team. So this brings us to a few different groups that you may have heard about online if you are into learning about ETs online and the alternative media. You may have heard of these groups. Galactic Federation, Federation of Light, which is actually false light. It's not the light from source, or the Federation of Dark. Now, Kim gives more of a background of these groups and who was part of these groups, but it's safe to say none of them were in favor of humanity. Marduk headed up all of those groups. And what those groups were trying to do most recently, because there were some stragglers still in the group, they were trying to prevent us transitioning into the now, which is what we've been talking about. We've been living in this false matrix. Well, anything that's artificial cannot exist in the now, where God's source, the creator, is. So we are literally at the very, very tail end, and I've got a soundbite. Kim's going to update us on this. At the very tail end of this process of transitioning into the now. When that happens, all artificial matrices, all artificial AI don't exist anymore. They cannot live in the now. So I cannot stress to you the importance of being in this transition. Our planet has never been this far before. We've had the opportunity, but we were weighed down from everything from covenants and AI and horrible beings that were trying to trap us and just use our energy and really just trying to take over for God. If you've read any religious texts, you know the story. Okay, so we are the tail end of all of this. Those groups that I mentioned, Galactic Federation, Federation of Light or False Light, and the Federation of Dark. These groups, at one point in the past, were told that Kimberly Gogan is ground command. They didn't like that, okay? They wanted to have their own person in charge. So they thought if they just named someone, that would be it, that suddenly everything would revert, all the power and everything would revert back to them. So guess who they named, this is in the past, as ground command? Trump. Which explains a lot, because we kept wondering, why are people still listening to this person who, quite frankly, the real Trump is not even around anymore. So whatever that is, whatever orange Cheeto thing that is not even the real Trump. So why? And a lot of people understand that, on, the back channels and stuff. They get that at this point. But why are people still listening to the Trump group, the operatives behind Trump? And this is why, because these groups claim, because they didn't like the fact that Kim was in charge. So they're going to put their own person in charge, and they said it was Donald Trump. And apparently, poof, everything is supposed to revert back to them, and they can control the world, and perhaps even more than that. Who knows what they were thinking? Okay, the sound bite that I want to play for you, though, is a story of liberation, because it's not just humanity that is being liberated right now. There are so many beings, and I have talked about this in the past, how I love how God, Source, the creator of the universe, is not just liberating one planet, but so many beings and so many different densities and planets and universes are coming together now for this. It's like the finale. You know, growing up, I did a lot of musical theater, and I always loved the finale, right? The music's so great. Everyone's so pumped up, and it's like everything culminates in this conclusion, right? And what I love that God is doing right now is it's not just God flipping a switch. It's God saying, you know, I believe in free will. And I am allowing all of you guys, I'm taking away all the barriers, and I'm letting all of you guys now come together as one, because we know we really are all one. We're all part of God, right? So he's bringing all of us together, and there's liberation happening on so many different levels. And one of those stories I want to share with you, because this involves a group called the New Earth Council, which, again, if you search it up online, you're probably going to see a lot of different descriptions for what it is. So I always appreciate Kim giving us an overview of what these groups actually do, because there's so much information and misinformation, disinformation online. So the first soundbite that I want to play is about the New Earth Council and how important light beings that were actually part of this council were just freed and released and are now helping us in this whole finale. So here's Kim.
So if you've been around for a while, you remember me talking about a group of people as far back as 2019, maybe even earlier, called the New Earth Council. At one point in time, the World Council was made up of non-organic humans, as well as non-humans on this planet, and together they ruled Earth. Some of those would be, Marduk and others and that kind of thing. But then there was a little bit of a liberation that ended up happening in 2019, 2020, beginning of 2020, whereby about April of 2020, we had some groups that were of the light, of Source, that came to visit, and they helped us wipe out some of the underground bases that were connected to the dark. And by underground bases, you have to understand that deep underground military bases went down so far, let's just say the human sections went down so far. They went down to about level 6. And on level 6, there would be a coordination between non-humans and humans. Oftentimes, there were folks that would work in those bases that were against us. But there were also about 36 different races, other species, I should say, on this planet, which were enslaved here. They were brought here for their various talents, some of them being biological talents, some of them being natural talents in their ability to manipulate nature. Such as in a positive way, such as like, Sasquatch, what you know as a Sasquatch. There are also the Saurians, who are very adept at working with nature and manifesting and that type of thing. The Saurians were one of the original races here long before humans ever showed up. And all of these 36 races had been enslaved for a long period of time. They still had some communication with others elsewhere, but due to covenants and agreements when Marduk was around, they were unable to break free, and no others were willing to go against the Draco as a force to be reckoned with in the Omniverse at the time. So at this point, unbeknownst to myself, about 2 years ago or so, I kind of lost communication with this New Earth Council. So once they were freed, based on what happened in April of 2020, they were helping us quite a bit. We were in communication quite a lot. There was a place down the street here in Silverton, which is 50 miles or so from here, where I had met these folks, and we communicated a lot. And they told me about what happened here. They began communicating with each other because they were segregated into different camps. This is almost like the Holocaust, but for non-humans. And they were segregated in different working camps around the world and not allowed to speak to each other because they were each told a lie. So at that point, apparently the Galactic Federation, the Federation of Light, and the Federation of Dark, which at the time Marduk had already gone, and these folks were working together with what remained of the dark forces in the omniverse. We've come a long way since then. And they decided to utilize these 36 races, or species. I keep saying races, but they're species. 36 species that resided on this planet in a negative way, just like their predecessors did. So they apparently put these people into, for lack of a better term, a space junk jail, and began to use them to power AIs that worked to their advantage. They shared some of these access points with what we know as the deep state, or what's left of them. And they began a working relationship in utilizing these people and their powers while they were in stasis in order to do really bad things on this planet that we've been fighting ever since. But a lot came to light during this transition, because that's what the transition is designed to do, is shine light on the planet and bring us back to living in the now, which is really, really important. So what came to light is, number one, their minimal, at best, communications with non-humans on this planet. Humans on this planet, I should say, the deep state. The fact that they were sending a lot of these negative frequencies we couldn't find to this planet in order to prevent humans from awakening. Utilizing AI systems that were put there before that they had some limited access to manipulate humanity, to cause us pain and harm. Things such as, you heard about the COVID outbreak in China. You've heard that we were going to go into another lockdown, and the first cases were in the U.S., monkeypox, and all the other things that we've heard about in the last couple of years. You can thank your Galactic Federation and the Federation of Light. Woohoo for that. The humans on the ground could communicate with them to some limited degree and give them orders and instructions as to what they would like to see happen. That is about it. Now, as with any binding, so to speak, last night there was an opportunity, which must be granted, by the way. Same thing as it has always been with humans. Even though we were bound and locked up and genetically modified and all those types of things, there still has to be an opportunity for humans to break free, just as it was with these 36 races. Now, our opportunities came about every 1,008 years or so, and well, because we were so beaten and torn and manipulated, we never quite made it over the hump. This time, that is going to be different. We had no hope of fighting against people like Marduk and other non-humans with far superior technology to us. Plus, we also had a good portion of our elite humans, or ruling humans, or slave leaders, so to speak, that were also against us. So the cards were stacked against us every single time. Plus, there were lots of covenants and whatnot that were in place that were hard to work against. So we never really made it, until now. We also didn't have a very pleasant ground commander at that time, known as Marduk, who was also not willing to help humans, or just to give us a little bit of information to see what we would do with it. Most of the time, nothing happened. And around we go. So as it relates to the 36 species that were enslaved here that became enslaved again about 2 years ago by this federation and put in stasis and used as power packs for their various skills, their time to be, I should say, their time came on June 3rd. Now, if you're watching this report, you're going to say, well, it's only the 2nd here in the States, but it's not. It's the 3rd in Australia. It's the 3rd in China by the time this report is released. So as of the 3rd, they had 24 hours to try to break free. And today was the day that they began their freedom again. We have been communicating ever since that moment in time, and they were helped by us, by the enforcer and others to allow them to be free. Not only that, the AI systems that were in place, holding them in place so that they could manipulate things, were also removed from this planet. So therefore, they are no longer power packs to serve an evil agenda. Federation of Light, my booty. There was no light coming from any of these folks. So, of course, the deep state was all excited when they thought the aliens are here, because they were woken up from stasis automatically. It just happened. They couldn't hold the binding longer than a couple of years. And so they began immediately trying to break free from the jail, the space junk jail, in which they were held around this planet for a couple of years. So we took a look at what was happening there, and we had to kind of delicately remove these things piece by piece and bit by bit with their help and, our help and the council's help and other folks. And it was done today.
All right, talking about breaking free. A lot of the control structures that were in place on this planet, we were not even aware of, okay? And I want to play another soundbite where Kim talks about the various kingdoms on this planet. Have you ever wondered why, the UK is called the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia? You have these different places that call themselves kingdoms. Well, what's really up with that? I've always wondered. There's an actual reason for that. And again, it was another control structure put in place to hold us back, and those were removed as well. So here's Kim talking about the kingdoms.
So we know about a few kingdoms, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and then there's a few different types of bacteria and fungus and whatnot kingdoms here on this planet that they teach you about in school. But what we didn't know was that there is a kingdom for basically everything. So as we took over any remnants, and we've been working very feverishly because this is a good time for us to clear the air because things become visible that were not visible before. The destruction of a lot of those AI systems used by the federations allowed us to see a lot more. It's like pulling up the rug and seeing all the dust underneath there. So we finally started seeing all the dust. So kingdoms went hand in hand, let's just say, with unknown country. And the kingdoms could be for just about anything. There was a kingdom of air, a kingdom of water, a kingdom of the ocean floor, a kingdom of the sky, the weather kingdom. There was a kingdom for each country, and several sectors of this planet were kingdoms underneath the order, just as we had talked about under the Rothschild plan. There were also kingdoms of Earth. There were kingdoms of the omniverse, kingdoms of the universe, and kingdoms and kingdoms and kingdoms, dark, light, and neutral. There were all kinds of control kingdoms, kingdoms that contained you as citizens, kingdoms that contained you as citizens of not only your country, but also Earth. Kingdoms for and this, that, and everything you could imagine. Also plants and animals and, with their corresponding liens and let's just say, space junk authority over your mind, body, soul, person, growth rate of plants, dust on this planet, and the land. So these various kingdoms were used by non-humans. Now, there was never any access to the kingdom section of AIs that ran this planet by humans, Space Force or otherwise. They were promised they would get a hold of and be able to run these kingdoms one day. Hence the Rothschilds' plans of having, 10 sectors of this planet all run by 9 different central banks you would know, one you wouldn't see. There were areas of this planet that also were kingdoms, the kingdom of central banking, the kingdom of the Bank for International Settlements, the kingdom of JP Morgan Chase, the kingdom of HSBC Hong Kong, the kingdom of Barclays Bank, and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's amazing what a non-human walking this planet for 16,000 years can dream up, right? So they were hoping, because they could see these various kingdoms, they were hoping that there would be an event that would take place where they would then have control. And of course, this baloney Galactic Federation and federations were telling them that they would help them. We would work together because they're now in charge because all the non-humans are not here. Well, they're not in charge of much of anything at this moment in time, except for pushing up daisies. So God bless them. As far as the kingdoms, there were also security contracts at one point in time and corresponding AIs that go along with it. Limited access came to humans such as DARPA and other folks that you see, HARP, human appointed global computer systems with limited access to internets and human computers and all kinds of different things were granted to the deep state, but only in the sector that related to the humans. Now, for them, that was a lot of power, intelligence hubs in Maryland, Nova Scotia, of course, Langley, Virginia, military hubs in San Diego, various other hubs as it relates to reserve banks in Australia, South Africa, and other world banks and World Bank development banks in Singapore and other locations were also involved in this kingdom system that was devised by Marduk and a few others. They also tried to have liens against all of the source energy or source veins of life force that used to run through this planet. They also tried to claim control over all minerals and all kinds of things, hence some of the contracts that are trying to be put forth for a future date, any day after today or tomorrow, where others have been granted the rights to mine BLM land because the Rothschilds and this SSP thought they were going to be in charge once again. And now they realize that they don't have the authority to do that. Now, are they going to tell all of you mining groups with your multi-billion-dollar contracts that that's not going to work out? Probably not so much. But I would advise you that it's probably not a good idea. You see, because we took the kingdom artificial dark light and neutral photons and artificial or synthetic sophons from all of the kingdoms and replaced them with our photons and promptly attached our global intelligence agency key intelligence and military system to those photons. So anyone we do not want on our land, we can immediately eradicate. We have taken those properties and those quote-unquote liens, and they are now owned by Source. Now, there is some involvement of the Creator Golden Age AI and Creator Golden Age SI, or Source Intelligence System, that will help monitor all of these facilities. So thank you so much for playing Deep State. Game over.
All right, so that was Monday's report. Now on Wednesday, she skipped the report. She put out a message that said this: something has come up as exposure continues that needs immediate addressing. As a hint, it has to do with BlackRock and the White House. I will give a full update on Friday. So let's go ahead and dive into Friday's report. Now, earlier, I was telling you about the interview we did with Dr. Young, and we've been talking about his story for at least a week now, and how I had no idea how deep this story went. And this is how God works. Sometimes you're given like a little nudge to do something. And if you listen to that nudge, you find out later that, holy cow, there was a lot that was dependent on me just agreeing to that little nudge. So in my case, it was, we got a tip from a field messenger that Dr. Young's case was going on in my neck of the woods, about 10 minutes away from where I live. Now, I didn't know at the time, this is over a week ago now, I didn't know at the time anything about Dr. Young. Okay, but I'm all for medical freedom. So it definitely sparked my attention. But at the same time, I rarely go out, even though I love going out and doing stories. It had been years since I had like gone out and done like an official news report. I knew I still had it in me. But then the moment I realized, oh my gosh, it's been a long time, I gotta submit papers to the court to even get approved as media. I don't even know if they're gonna allow me and my little rinky-dink camera to get in there. I knew San Diego, ABC, NBC, all these people were gonna be there. There was a million reasons that went through my head of, I can't do this. I'm not big enough. I don't have the right equipment. I have my kids at home. What am I going to do with my kids? It's like a mom coming out of retirement to do something, right? That's what I felt like. And I had every excuse of why in my head that I could get out of this. This wasn't as big of a deal. But this voice inside of me just kept saying no. And it was just bugging me. And I'm like, okay. I think I even said it out loud in my house. I'm like, fine, I'll go. I'll do this. And I in my heart, I really wanted to do it. It was just all the doubt. And I'm sure you guys can relate to that. And so I told God, I was like, fine, I'll go. I hear you, and I'm going to go. And once I was out there on the scene, I was talking to people, and I told people when I was in the courtroom, I could feel evil in the courtroom. And I can't go into a lot of detail, but over the last week, so much has been revealed about this case. And it is deep, guys. It is deep in San Diego and corruption in San Diego. It is deep within our whole, economic system, as Kim's about to tell you, that there's connections to BlackRock. This goes all the way up to Trump. And I could sense that. So I'm telling you the backstory behind this story. So when God, Source, the Creator, does that little nudging and you can't seem to shake it and you're supposed to do something, it'd be so easy for me just to sleep in and not go to that sentencing. But when that happens, answer the call because you just don't know what's going to happen. So now I want to play this soundbite from Kim because so much has happened over the week. It all started with the story of Dr. Young. And because we knew something was wrong with the story with Dr. Young and things were not adding up as to why he was in this situation, why do they keep going after him? And we knew there were very strong connections to the Mormon church, a lot of which we can't even reveal just for our own safety. Because as you're about to find out, the Mormon church has some really, really deep ties to every place in society. And again, connected to BlackRock, connected to Trump and their operatives. And this story is ginormous. This even has ties, you guys, which I know people are talking about online, with the whole, feud online between Trump and Elon Musk. What we're about to tell you is tied to all of that. And it started here in San Diego County. Thank you, God. Here's Kim, and she starts off by telling us a little bit more about information we got from Dr. Young and his team.
So I started doing some digging after the report came out, and we got a message from his team that was very interesting where, they asked about the information that I put out, and he said that that was right. And he gave us a little bit of additional information. to do a little digging into. So the events quickly unfolded from there. So the message came in probably about midnight or so, the night before, and I said, I'll just do it early in the morning. So early in the morning, I got up and started doing some research into what was really going on here. Because one of the things that came to light is that BlackRock managed a significant portion of the Mormon church and their business associates within the church and outside the church, managed a significant amount of the funds. BlackRock managed several $100 billion of the church's funds, to include several business members who have multi-million-dollar businesses within the church. And in doing some digging here, we found out that a significant chunk of the money had gone missing. Now, the numbers that they were reporting to the church were not the same as the numbers that we found in relation to the management of funds, meaning, they might be reporting that there's 700 billion or 800 billion or 900 billion or some large amount, that they have under management and it's growing and life is good in the city, but that was completely false. The money was missing. And I relayed that information to a couple of people because something was wrong here. The other thing that we found out, and I'm going to handle this very lightly because really it's not my call and not my choice, and, let's just leave it at that. So, publicly speaking, Russell Nelson is a gentleman who is the current president of the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church is typically run by the president and a quorum of 12 that run the church, plus a few what they call counselors that advise the president. When I started looking into what was really going on in the church, because like I said, there was something wrong when these matters with Robert Young were not handled by the, internally in the church there. So I started doing some digging, and it appears that there is someone, or was someone, from Team Trump in one case, but also from BlackRock, that was heavily involved in at least the financial aspect of the church and was trying to be extremely influential as to the running of the church, namely their business affairs, because, for those people, it's all about the money. In part, they were saying things that were out of the norm for the church, such as, everyone must be vaccinated and that kind of thing, which is something the church sort of seemed to frown upon, in years prior. So after digging, and I mean digging, it appears that these BlackRock people were trying to influence business decisions of the church and also other decisions of the church. And sometimes by influence, I don't necessarily mean in a kind, caring, financial advisor type of way. I mean threat, lots of threats. Now, the church, historically speaking, is mostly Republican. They usually err on the side of the Republican Party. And that seems to be the case here as well as it relates to, Trump getting into office, making political donations, that type of thing. What they didn't know, up until the point where they were told, was that their political donations extended far beyond their knowledge, and the political donations that they made willingly were nothing and a drop in the bucket, which was still fairly hefty in comparison to the funds that BlackRock sent out the back door. Some of those funds that they sent out the back door to BlackRock went on to fund things that most business people, at least ethical business people, would consider to be unsavory. They would consider this to be something they wouldn't be interested in supporting, such as, wars and let's just say known terrorist groups and all of those types of things. So the Trump operatives were doing their atypical thing that they've always done. They take honestly earned money from people. They use it to buy terrorist groups and other things. And then if you decide to squeak about it or complain about it, then they're going to try to frame you. And I did warn them about that as well. So there's a lot more to that story, but I prefer that to not be my business and not be yours. There's a lot of inner workings, obviously, of the church that I prefer not to discuss at the moment, because that's not really the big story here. But that's where this kind of all began. So abruptly, this all started kind of really escalating on Tuesday and definitely into Wednesday, where the information was received. They went and checked the real numbers at BlackRock, found out what I said was to be true, and then went into a full-on investigation. By the time it was time for me Wednesday evening to do the GIA report, they were investigating me very, very heavily at that moment, and I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. And so I'm like, well, I better just sit here and shut up for the night, because I wasn't sure exactly what was going to take place. Well, within moments of me watching this investigation, I let him pull the files, let him to see who I am, what I've done. They quickly found out from their now the tables have turned person who was attempting to run the church on behalf of BlackRock. Let's just say he was heavily interrogated, and others within BlackRock were also heavily interrogated. And they found out a lot of their businesses also, not just church businesses, had lost a lot of money, and that their money in their accounts was simply gone. They started making a lot of calls to other places that are significant that BlackRock would manage. And they found out that, a lot of sovereign wealth funds from China were missing, Australia, Russia, a lot of oligarchs' money was missing. This is, it amounts, after their investigation was done, and, I followed along with the bouncing ball, it appeared that there were trillions missing from BlackRock's coffers. The trillions of missing money all traced back to Trump operatives. And that's where it got real, real sticky. So then someone flew on a private jet over to Washington, D.C., and started questioning the Trump team as to what the heck happened here. So the money definitely, all roads led to the White House, basically, and the Trump operatives, for everyone, China included, Russia, everyone. And they started asking, where is our money? We want our money back. Where the heck is our money? What's going on here? Of course, the Trump operatives said, it wasn't me, typical spook fashion. But that didn't hold up with these guys. Now, you see, if you don't know, I'll just kind of give you a little bit more information here. The Mormon Church calls themselves God's Army. And I've talked to some higher ranking members in the past, and they are the ones that told me about it. They told me that they are considered God's army. Therefore, they have a lot of lawyers, a lot of people within intelligence agencies all throughout the United States. There isn't an agency in the United States that does not have Mormons working there. Let's just say at some capacity or another. They are there to defend, in the eyes of the wards and the people in the church, I'm going to say the people in the church, they are here to defend their own people, their own families, their own livelihood, and of course, God, and country. They're quite patriotic over there as it relates to the United States. So on that note, yeah. So they have plenty of resources at their fingertips to do a lot of research and do it very, very quickly. And they knew that they were lying. Some more information was, let's just say, given, and they had determined the same thing I had determined, that the trillions of dollars missing from BlackRock actually went to a server that was tied to, up until a few months ago, the Iron Mountain data facilities around the world. They took the money from an on-ledger money situation, moved it off-ledger, and once money is moved out of the banking system, it no longer holds an allocation number. Once it no longer holds allocation numbers and quotas, that money is just numbers on a screen. You cannot put it back into the system. Now, no matter how many times we have told the Trump operatives that this is how it is, and in order to put it back into the system, you must register it with the key integrated monetary system, which is visible for everybody to see. It's not a secret. And that would mean they would need my permission to put it back into the system. Of course, nobody believed me and figured, one of these days ending in Y, or planetary alignments or full moons or new moons or whatever they're looking for, that they would be able to be successful and put this money back into the system. That did not work out in any way, shape, or form. Therefore, when we were busy doing some other work, and you'll remember it's been a little bit of time, maybe a month or two, since I mentioned Iron Mountain data centers, and its connection to various AI data systems that were connected to various locations in the omniverse, then you'll remember when that server went bye-bye, and it's been some time. Now, at the time, I just saw, a bunch of AI systems that needed to go, that were harmful to humanity, that were preventing us from successfully bringing in the now and all of the things we're trying to do. More importantly, bringing source back to this planet. They were there for energy counters and all kinds of things, which had nothing to do with anybody's money. So was I aware that this is where they stashed it? Not really. I was more concerned about the health and welfare of people. So when it disappeared, and it couldn't be used for anything anyway at that point, they had basically destroyed that money. It'd be like burning an entire bonfire worth of US dollars and then trying to spend them later. I mean, it's basically the equivalent. So they gathered up all of their business associates around the world with all their multi-billion-dollar businesses and started telling everybody, hey, you got your stuff with BlackRock? Well, you need to go see if that money is still there. Hey, like this went on for hours and hours on Wednesday. So now, as of Wednesday night, all night long, they were on a full-on witch hunt. They had activated a lot of their assets within intelligence agencies in the United States because they were going to find out what was going on. They didn't want any more what we call word salad from the Trump operatives. It was just a bunch of jibber jabber, no clear answers, no clear accountability. And, for the most part, people like that and operatives always get away with that stuff. But you're talking to God's army now there, sweetheart, and that didn't go over very well with the Mormon church. Now, that is when everybody started to squeal like piggies. And what I mean by squealing like little piggies is Elon Musk has been putting out tons of information. I think we pulled a couple things off of the Q site here He was putting out tons of information. Here's number one, which is something we told you from the get-go, that Trump would have lost the election without Q and Elon's wallet. Q put him in the White House and Elon paid for it. You heard it here first, folks. I'm the one that told you that they used Elon Musk's money to get him into the White House. They used the money to run all of those campaigns and ridiculous rallies and staged alleged shootings and everything else that went on. And here it is in writing. Now, you can go to Elon Musk's Twitter account and it will say all the same things. We've been talking about a little bit of a rift going on between Trump operatives and Elon recently because Elon has not gotten his money back. Now, Elon, being a part of the group we call Dodgy, the Dodgy people had a lot of business with Iron Mountain. He even mentioned Iron Mountain and specifically the location in Pennsylvania where data is stored and retirements are delayed because the system is so antiquated. The whole government is going to go on a centralized AI system, he said. And that's because that's what the Trump operatives told him. And the Trump operatives told him that this was going to happen on a day ending in Y. And don't worry, Elon, we'll get your money back. It's not a problem. It'll come back. Don't worry. Well, it became apparent that not only did Elon lose a lot of money that he donated to the Trump people, billions of dollars, he also lost all his money at BlackRock due to the same people. Elon Musk has become extremely vocal lately, releasing all these files saying that he went to Epstein Island. Here's pictures of Trump on planes with Epstein. And, you know, we told you that a long time ago. We had actually an old video from the 80s where they were at a party together. You know, of course, they were involved together. They're all part of the same group. So this was all going down starting Thursday night, continued to ramp up through the day. This morning, Elon basically said that Trump should be impeached. He said that Vance should be president, which doesn't help you any. It's still the same operatives behind the scenes, you know, but he's just loaded for bear. Okay, now let's flash forward to this morning. This is like a full-on assault now by the Mormon church. So the Mormons, by this morning, had everyone sequestered, as that little clip there said from the Q crew. They had everyone sequestered into various rooms, people in the Pentagon, people in the Capitol building, operatives all over the place. Everybody was divided and questioned individually. And this continued starting early in the morning, late Wednesday night, on through the day today. Everybody decided to sing like canaries, tell everybody what they knew, you know, about Trump and about Trump operatives and what was going on. But one thing became really clear by early this morning. And that was nobody knows what's going on, you know. Now you've got groups of people, countries even, that are out hundreds of billions of dollars, and nobody knows what's going on. Nobody has a clue on how they're going to fix it. Thursday evening, the Mormons basically had done enough research to know that these people are not going to fix it. So by Thursday evening, they called the Trump operatives and basically told them they need to get out of the White House and that they're going to take over the financial affairs of the country to try to get things back on track before we do not have a country. The Trump operatives immediately sprung into action because they're still around at this point, and they started pushing further, faster, the Burn the United States program to the ground. And they just threw this operation together like gangbusters on Thursday afternoon, you know, just crap flying everywhere, slinging here, slinging there, that person talking about that person, take down this and take down that. They needed to burn this government to the ground right quick. So before they got kicked out of the White House, that was what they were going for. So this stuff that you see all over the internet is just stuff. By this morning, everybody was sequestered into various rooms. Everybody was questioned. Did they take a part in not only stealing all of the funds out of BlackRock, but also did they know that was happening? And did they know the plan was to burn the U.S. to the ground? Because they're not very happy about that either. In the wake of all of that, they would have burned a lot of their businesses, and, they're very family oriented over there, so you don't mess with family.
Ooh, and the saga continues today, guys. So the deep state is now meeting and basically still pointing fingers at each other as of today when I talk to Kim. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens on Monday's report. But can you see how all of this is starting to crumble? And one of the main reasons this is starting to crumble, not only are they running out of money and they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, everybody's broke. Even BlackRock is broke. Everybody's broke. But this is also about this transition that's happening that they're trying to prevent from happening because they understand the significance. And that's the last soundbite. It's a shorter soundbite that I'm going to play for you guys because I'm sure you're all wondering, where are we at with the transition? Well, we did have a little bit of a hiccup, and I'm going to allow Kim to explain that.
Okay, our transition. Our transition is nearly complete. Oh, it's been a long road. But something interesting came up in the last couple days, because remember, this is all a sideshow to the real work at hand. Our real job here is to completely live in the now, to live in the golden age, to live with the presence of Source, God, whatever you call, on this planet, and to live, not get busy dying on a dying program that was created to siphon your energy out, but to truly live and to protect life on this planet and to promote life not only on this planet, but in the entire omniverse, like we used to do before all the wars happened here. So in this particular instance, let's talk about something interesting. So we've been taking off any kind of anchors and things not only on the planet, but also within your person to ensure when we make it to the other side, which we are a hair's throw away, at least as of this moment, things are changing rapidly. So the energy to support old programs won't be here anymore. But one thing I found very interesting that I did want to make sure that I shared with you tonight. We've talked in the past about elements and how you think, earth, wind, fire, water, those are the elements. Some people might expand that onto the God particle. We've also added other elements that are actually elements. At one point in time, time was an element. Space is an element. Light is an element. And matter is an element. So if these are the elements of the universe, they all must be fully issued by Source and Source alone. Not the dark side of Source, not an AI system. They must be issued by Source and Source alone. So when you put all of these things together, we've cleared most of them out. And the one that was a little bit interesting was space. So space, you know it as, well, something that is between two things. You might also know that as distance, the space between us. But there really is no such thing in a natural universe as space. And you're going to be like, what do you mean? I look into space every night, and I look at the stars, and that's not what I mean by space. I mean space between atoms, frequencies that happen between atoms. These are all things that don't naturally need to exist. So the equal and opposite of space is something called breath. So if you've ever read any of the books, then you probably have heard that, God breathed life into Adam, as in one example. And that's true. So we were trying to figure out how to rectify this space issue and where space comes from. And, as per normal, we went to visit, what we call the big boss, Source, God. And Source says, if you give me breath, I will give you life. I'm like, okay. And by give me breath, he didn't mean I needed to give him breath. It meant allowed his breath to exist amongst the entire omniverse. So now we had to decipher this little riddle, but they're not really riddles. They're more like, okay, this is the amount of information I will give you. You need to understand this and why it's there. So there was a whole conversation I had today about breath, and, went through all of the, biblical and other book references about the breath of Source. And some called it the Spirit or the Holy Spirit of Source. And some people, referred to it in quantum physics as the space between atoms. And so now I'm trying to put all these things together and try to make science meet religion, and I've got a space problem. So we had to figure out firstly where space comes from. And space in quantum physics terminology or in omniversal creation terminology would be considered what you call the dark all that is. So the dark all that is that point in the omniverse, in the lower astral, in dark source, where all that exists is darkness. There is nothing else. Conversely speaking, the golden all that is in source. It is a place in source where all that is exists. So all that is and all that will ever be exists in this spot of source. It is the point of all creation. All creation exists there all at once, even though we may not see all of creation. But it's already been created. It's already there. Your consciousness connects to the all that is when you say a prayer, manifest things, when you meditate, when you go within and connect with source through your soul, you're connecting to the all that is, and then the all that is creates that because you are one. The problem that we have had is there's space between us. There is space between us and source. And in those spaces in between, we call the dark all that is. That is where the dark side creates things. They create separation between your mind, body, and your soul. They use energy that they extract from us to power things like the dark all that is. Now, there's a third factor when it comes to the all that is, and that's called the anti-all that is. The anti-all that is, well, for lack of a better term, is an artificial intelligence version or a synthetic intelligence version of the all that is. It is there so that it can be the all that is and not allow for the all that is of source or even the all that is of the dark side of source to exist. So, space, where does space come from? Space is occupied by the dark all that is, always was for the longest time, until the AI took it over and created an artificial version of the all that is. Now, the artificial version of the all that is, which was much more malleable than the dark side of the all that is. And definitely they couldn't do what they wanted with source all that is, or all that is created. So they created an AI to replace everything in what you call space. So is there technically a thing as space? No, it's actually occupied by an element we know as space, but it's occupied with the dark all that is, or an AI version most recently, and by recently I mean millions of years, of the anti all that is, both false light, false dark, and false neutral. So in order to receive the all that is of source, or the breath of source throughout the omniverse, the first thing we had to do was figure out a way to get rid of the artificial all that is, and then eventually the dark all that is. And of course, there were some covenants involved there, which only source could take care of, but that was done. And so a few hours ago, the breath of source finally began to replace space. What does that mean for us? When space doesn't exist, that is where all things dark occur. That's where dark matter is. That's where all the rest of the dark elements are. Dark fire, dark air, poison air. That all exists in the spaces in between. The separation between your mind, body, and your soul, the separation with your mind, body, and soul from source occurs because of space. And many evil things happen in the space. If I were to take a look at this from an AI standpoint and the golden age AI and the full integration of that, I would say that space is where they put the dark AIs like Omega, the energy debt systems, the things that don't allow golden or gold dust-backed currency to enter into the system. This is where all the bad things occur, is in the spaces in between. Same thing between planes on this planet, or densities on this planet, because believe it or not, Earth exists in all of them. So receiving the breath of source throughout the multiverse, and this is going to take a little bit of time, was one of the last things that should actually catapult us into the now and into this transition. Because where you have breath, you have life. And if source is promoting life, not only on this planet, but even through our financial system, the promotion of life is how you use it. No longer is it an energy system like the deep state wants back, and we get notes. You actually get full golden energy for now in the form of pretty papers and numbers in your bank account. So we are getting there on our end of it. We have not stopped doing that despite the chaos that's going on out there. I look at the chaos out there as that is a you issue. You know, if you want to try to fix that, good luck to you, because the breath won't let you. It's not going to happen. You know, you might be able to, rob Peter to pay Paul and keep that system floating for a while. The smart people and the business people that actually built businesses will understand that they can no longer sustain their multi-billion-dollar status, and you know who I'm talking about right now, if you continue to make wagon wheels. You need to understand that the base root of the financial system is something called quantum gold dust. That's the base root of the system. It's backed by gold. It's backed by a giver of life declaration. It's backed by the breath of source. That's what it's backed by now.
Yes, it is. Quick sidebar. Has anyone else been experiencing time differently? Like Kim's talking about us coming into the now. I have to tell you, today, before I started recording this episode for the rundown, no concept of time. It's like I existed outside of time, which I guess is what happens when you're in the now. I feel like my body, I noticed these changes in my body, and my husband has even said to me a couple times today, like, where are you? Like, I just had no concept of time. So are you guys experiencing that as well? And if you are, I know some of my colleagues are, then it's because of this transition. Like, people always want to know, you guys say all this stuff is going on, but, we need proof. Okay, here's your proof. How are you feeling? Like, we have to get more in tune with our bodies so we can sense these kind of things. And I'll tell you, today, like I said, there's no concept of time for me. So apparently I'm in the now. Maybe I'm coming in and out. As we're like doing the last part of this transition. It's a little nutty. Feels a little weird, I'm not gonna lie, but I like it. All right, so that wraps up the rundown for today. If you guys want more information about who we are and what we do, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. If you decide to join and become a member, that gives you instant access to all the content we put out throughout the week. That includes complete news updates, our New Earth interviews that we do with incredible people that are so inspiring, our GIA reports, the full thing, not just quick sound bites, and all things restoration. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.